Welcome back to 7th Generation Now. Today we're going to talk about the presentation of self in everyday life. This is a book written by American sociologist Erving Goffman in 1959. He writes about a very important concept called impression management. I think that there's all kinds of amazing concepts and theoretical perspectives that you can learn in sociology, but for me, impression management has been one of the most important. I use this idea pretty much every single day in my life. So we're going to talk about impression management and this idea that life is like theater and much, much more. So let's get into it right now. So according to Erving Goffman, life is like theater. Think of yourself as if you're in this epic story. Think of all the different roles that you play. According to Erving Goffman, sometimes we're the actor, sometimes we're the audience. And I'll give you an example of that. When I go to school and I teach my classes, I'm typically the actor. I'm upstage, giving my lecture, trying to give my best performance, trying to make sure that you all understand whatever sociological ideas or concepts that I'm teaching. And if you're sitting in the seats and you're paying attention to the lecture, you're the audience. And so you're also playing a role. You have to come prepared. Just like I have to come prepared with my lecture notes, my PowerPoint presentation. You have to come prepared as a student. You have to be on time. You have to bring your notebook, a pen or pencil. And so it doesn't just stop there. Imagine when you leave class and you go to work, you have to become whoever it is that you need to become at work. If you're in customer service, you have to talk to your customers a certain way. If you go home and parent your children, you're taking on a different role. If you're going to hang out with friends, you're taking on another role. So life, at least according to Erving Goffman, comes with all these different social roles, which have all these different identities, all these different scripts and expectations that come with the different identities that we take on. In fact, Erving Goffman would argue that there isn't one true identity that you have. I often ask my students, what's your true identity? Where is it located? And some students will say, well, it's inside of me. It's right here. It's who I really am. And according to Erving Goffman, we don't really have one true identity. We have these multiple identities that we take on in the social roles that we take on. And so for me, I'm a father, I'm a son, college professor. The way that I behave as a college professor is a lot different than the way that I interact with my family or my friends. In the evening, I go to my gym and I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I become Coach B. And that's a different identity that I take on. And then when I come home, I am the father, I am the person who gives advice to my children, who is a friend to the different people in my life that I care about, and so forth. Also, according to Erving Goffman, there's this natural kind of human drive to want to be accepted by people. So we want to be validated. We want to be validated for the roles that we play. When I first became a teacher, I was really insecure. I didn't know if I knew enough about sociology. I had been studying sociology for years, but I had never been in front of a classroom teaching. And I really did need validation from my students that they understood the concepts that I was teaching. And so if I had a friend who said, hey man, you're a really great sociology professor, I'd be, how would you know? You've never taken one of my classes. And so the validation that I would want to get would be from my students, from my colleagues, from the people doing the evaluations. And this goes for my friendships as well. So if a student came up to me and said, oh, you're a really good friend, I would probably think to myself, well, you don't really qualify as a friend. And the relationship between student and professor is a lot different than a friendship. And so we're looking for validation, at least according to Erving Goffman, from the people that we interact with in whatever role that we're playing. So for me, I would like to see myself as a good father, and my children are going to hopefully give me that validation. I would like to see myself as a great professor, I think that I am, and I think that comes from getting validation from my students and the way that they react to my lectures, and also getting good evaluations and so forth. And just for a moment, just think of all the different identities that we take on, and just think about the social roles and the expectations that come with those different identities. And it can be really, really confusing at times. For example, when I'm walking to class, I might bump into a colleague. My interactions with a colleague might be a little different than my interactions with a student. When I leave school and I interact with my children, those interactions are going to be different than my interactions with my students. When I go to my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes, my interactions are going to change with my students at the gym. And it's just endless social roles, endless identities that we take on. From this idea of impression management, this idea that you have the ability, each and every one of us, to manage how other people see us by the way that we give a performance. So for example, if I want my students to see myself as a good sociology professor, then I need to make sure that I'm prepared. I need to make sure that I'm looking at my notes. I need to make sure that I'm reading up on the topics that I will be lecturing on. And this is how I gain validation from the people who are judging me whether or not I'm a good professor. And the same goes for students. If the students want to be seen as good students, there's certain things that you can do as well. Show up to class on time, do your work, ask questions, make sure that you're taking notes during class. Sit in the front of the classroom. Make sure that your body language presents yourself in such a way that you look like you're paying attention. And so impression management is very, very powerful, and we have to do this. I know that there's some days when I wake up, maybe I didn't get enough sleep, maybe I'm a little grouchy, I didn't get my morning cup of coffee. If I don't get my cup of coffee in the morning, I'm a mess. And let's just say I'm running late, I'm running out the door, and I'm a little bit stressed out. When I get to work, I need to give the impression as if I got it put together, that I'm put together, that I'm not stressed out, that I'm going to give the best performance possible. And this is something that we all can benefit from learning how to do, how to give your best performance, learning how to understand this is the social role that I'm playing right now. And I want to impress upon the people around me that I know what I'm doing, that I'm effective in the workplace, and I'm effective at giving sociological lectures, that I'm a great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach. Whatever it is that I want to do in life, and I want people to think about me, I have the ability to, I wouldn't say control other people's views of me, but at least impress upon them that I'm competent, that I'm compassionate, warm, whatever it is that I want people to think that I am. And this is a very, very powerful skill. So let's talk about the front stage and the back stage, or what Goffman calls the front region and the back region. So the back region is where you're getting prepared for a social role. It's kind of like in theater, you're backstage, you're getting ready, you're getting your costume ready, and you're going to go out there and give your performance. When you give your performance, that's the front region. And so according to some, the back region may be a little less stressful because you can kind of be yourself. But that may not be the case. Sometimes the back region is really, really stressful. I remember when I applied for the job that I currently have, being in the backstage, thinking about, I'm about ready to give a lecture, I have to write up a quick essay on a particular topic, and being in that back region was definitely a little stressful. I remember that morning before I went for the interview, and I was ironing my clothes, I was getting my costume ready, if you will, because I wanted to give my best performance. I wanted to get the job. And sometimes the back region is a little bit laid back. So if you had a rough day at work and you come home and you can relax and maybe you can watch TV or just hang out with your family, maybe the back region can be less stressful. But in the morning, the back region, putting your morning costume on, whether it's doing your hair or taking a shower, or ironing your clothes, making sure that you get breakfast and your morning cup of coffee, sometimes that could be a little stressful. The front region, that's when you're on stage. That's when you want to give your best performance. And so just think about the person that you want to be and think about the different roles that you take on. The roles that we take on in our life are going to change. They're not always going to be the same. There was a time when I was a student and I wasn't a college professor. And there's going to be a time where I'll probably retire and I'll no longer teach, and I'll probably take on another role to keep me busy. But the roles that we take on can cause a lot of stress in our life. In some cases, we take on way too many roles. There's something called role strain, where you just have all these different roles that you have to play. For example, students, they have jobs. Some students have kids. In some cases, you're taking care of an elderly loved one. So think about all the different roles that you have to play and think about the stress that comes with them. So in some cases, people experience role strain. There's also role conflict as well. Role conflict comes into play when you are a friend and you have a group of people that you like to hang out with, and they call you up on Friday night and you're like, hey, let's go hang out. But you have some work that you need to do. You have a paper that you need to write. That's role conflict. On one hand, you need to play the role of the student. On the other hand, you're also a friend and you like to hang out. And maybe you want to play that other role, but those two roles conflict with one another. There's also something called role exit. So let's just say you don't like something that you're doing. Maybe there's a role that you've taken on and you don't like yourself and how you have to put your costume on every morning, and you don't like being in the front region, having to give whatever performance that you're giving. You could exit out of roles. So if you have a job that you don't like, you could always decide to get a new job. There's certain roles that you can't just exit out of. For example, if you're a parent, you can't just decide, hey, I don't want to be a parent any longer. I mean, I guess you could decide to do that, but what would that say about you as a parent? But there are certain roles that I have exited out of. For example, I've trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for almost 20 years now, and I've transitioned from the role of a Jiu-Jitsu student to the role of a Jiu-Jitsu instructor, and they're completely different roles. It's completely different. Walking into the gym and being a student, you're a part of the audience mostly. But when you're the coach, when you're the teacher, you're on the front stage. You have to make sure that everybody is learning the different techniques that you're learning. Transitioning from a student to a college professor was also very stressful as well. And so we can exit out of roles if we don't like the different social identities that we've taken on. We can find new identities to take on. And this is ongoing, and that's why Goffman argues that life is like theater. And so think of yourself as if you're in this epic story, and think about the story that you want to write. Think about the way that you want people to see you. And I know there's some people out there probably thinking, I don't really care what people think of me. But human beings, for the most part, want to be agreeable. We've lived in groups our entire existence. Impression management is going to help you in a modern society because we're going to have a boss that's going to be evaluating us. We're going to have professors who are going to evaluate our work. And so if you don't really like how you are, you don't like the roles that you're currently playing, exit out of them and take on new roles. Take on roles that are going to make you happy. And if you're experiencing role strain or role conflict, then maybe you need to exit out of a role or two. Go out there and practice your impression management skills. You should always be polite, always be kind to people, because that's a really great way to make an impression, just to present yourself as a decent person. And so being polite, being kind, being compassionate, I think is a great start when it comes to impression management. All right, so this is it. Erving Goffman and the presentation of self. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope I gave my best performance possible. Go out there and practice your impression management skills. And until next time, peace.